Welcome to Beyond the Lair. Today's guest is Jeff Ward, founder and CEO of Animikii. We have a conversation with Jeff about careers in technology, AI, and the importance of data sovereignty in Indigenous communities. Hello, welcome to Beyond the Lair, a podcast where we have inspirational speakers and leaders, have conversations with them so they can educate, inspire, and elevate all of us. My name is Gina Jackson Montgomery. I'm your co-host.
And I'm Dean Montgomery.
And we are so happy to have as our guest today, Jeff Ward from Animikii. Jeff is Ojibwe and Métis, originally from Manitoba. He currently lives in Victoria. He is the CEO and started Animikii, an Indigenous technology company, in 2003. He also sits on the board for APTN and is an author and great inspiration. It's so great to have you with us today, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.
We have known each other actually for a few years, probably a decade or so. I was working for the Squamish Nation, and we had a huge entrepreneur program that we were developing, and I purchased through the Squamish Nation about 200 books that you had written with your brother Scott Ward. And before we get into where that came from and how you developed the energizing entrepreneurial spirit, maybe we can talk a little bit about who you are and where you grew up.
Sure, yeah. Anin Bojo, Jeff Ward, Indigenous Makwan Dodem, Treaty 1, Donjaba, and I'm connecting to you from Lekwungen territory, colonially known as Victoria. I did grow up in Manitoba, and Ojibwe and Métis on my dad's side, and Ukrainian and English on my mom's side. And started Animikii Indigenous Technology in 2003. We just celebrated our 21st anniversary as a company.
Congratulations. Where did you mentioned before when we were talking that you had 4 brothers. So growing up with 4 male children in the house, how is that working, and which ones of your brothers are still involved in entrepreneurism, and was it something that you did as children?
Yeah, 2 older brothers. There's 3 of us in total, and I was surrounded by entrepreneurship as a kid. My parents both had businesses throughout our childhood, and I think we got bit by that entrepreneurial bug pretty early on. And I'd say part of that is through the inspiration of my grandmother as well, who taught us how to do beadwork, and we would sell our earrings at the powwows. I remember the first time I made my first sale as a kid, and just sort of being around that. I mean, my grandmother never would call herself an entrepreneur, but that's how she supported her kids growing up, was through entrepreneurship. And so fast forward to today. My brother Scott, the Indigenous hypnotist, is still in business, and he's been traveling from coast to coast to coast as an entrepreneur. And when we had met, you were one of the biggest supporters of our book in the early days, and it's something I'll always be grateful. As an entrepreneur, to create something and then somebody buy 200 copies of it was pretty amazing. But Scott and I, when we created that book, it was, we looked at his business and my business, which were, totally different businesses, but we looked to where we agreed upon aspects of entrepreneurship, and we wrote that book. Quite a few years ago. It needs to be updated, but it's something that we've been talking about maybe doing.
Great. So how did first off, where in Manitoba, where were you, and how did you go from being an entrepreneur on like the powwow trail into tech?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I grew up in East Selkirk, Manitoba. My whole life I actually wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to, both my parents were in the health profession. They were both nurses. And so I thought I was going to be a doctor my whole life. And, as I got into my high school years, this is in the late 1990s when the internet was becoming a thing, and somebody made the mistake to pay me to make a website for them. I was trying to figure that out, and family's hopes and dreams of the first family doctor out the window. And I started just making websites for people, friends, and family, and that kind of thing. But yeah, that's sort of how I got started into building tech. It was just teaching myself how to build websites and that kind of thing, and that just progressed to the next thing and the next thing. So
And what platform were you using then when you did those websites? Because a lot of that was just coding, was it not?
yeah,
There's no
just
Wix or anything like that. Yeah.
HTML and CSS. Actually, it was before CSS even. Yeah, just straight coding. And earlier or first few years of my company, once I created Animikii in 2003, is I created my own platform, kind of like a Wix, like a Squarespace, and we still operate that to this day. It's a website building tool. So, it went quickly from building websites for people to building the tools that people can then use to build things themselves digitally.
Amazing.
Excellent. Now, your company, Animikii, you started this in 2003. Originally, was it, as you mentioned, building websites and then tools, and then technology has shifted so much in 21 years. I can't even imagine the paradigm shift in I mean, it must be very exciting for you to watch that. Number one, the name Animikii. What does it come from? Where does it mean? And then also, what kind of services did you provide at the very beginning, in the middle, and then right now? Because I know that we're going to get into AI and technology and as we move forward. But what kind of services were originally, and what do you offer now?
Yes, from day one, I have been supporting Indigenous focused organizations to use digital technologies to empower Indigenous peoples. And so early on, that was building websites and getting folks connected online. This is around 2003, and a lot of the communities that I was raised within and organizations that I wanted to support were not online. And so the first early days of my business were just that, creating websites and getting folks connected. And oh, by the way, Animikii, you asked, what does that mean? So Animikii is actually my name, Animikii Kiwizans, which means Thunderbird Boy in Ojibwe, which is a name that I received when I was a boy. And when I needed to go and register my company, I needed to invoice my first customer, and I needed a name and an entity, so I just used my name. I never thought in that moment that 20 years later would be a team of 30 and building technology platforms and scaling that. But that's where the name comes from, is from my name, from my culture. And so with a name like Animikii and being a technologist, really just wanting to support the communities that I was raised within. And that's evolved over the years. Technology, as you mentioned, like, it changes rapidly. And it feels like I have a new job every year. There's always something new to learn. This year, of course, the last couple of years, AI has been a big boom, and it's certainly something to stay on top of and learn. But I've also seen a lot of technologies sort of come and go, come and stay, like over 20 years. I started my business before the smartphone, before tablets, right? So there's just a lot of things before social media, before platforms like website builders and all this sorts of thing. And it was a lonely place to be as an Indigenous person in tech in 2003. And I had spent some time in Silicon Valley prior to starting my business, and it was just a really materialistic, capitalistic place to be as essentially a teenager when I worked in the Bay Area. And so when I started my company, I just really wanted to give back to community and lift our people up through technology. So that, the technologies have changed over the years, but the mission, the impact, our values, and wanting to use technology as a sort of societal equalizer is a way for us to bring Indigenous tech to the world, and also share that Indigenous peoples, we've always been technologists, and we've always been inventors and scientists and all of these things, and entrepreneurs, right? And so how might we, as Indigenous entrepreneurs and technologists, think about these technologies and businesses just a little bit differently than mainstream? So yeah.
Can you paint a picture of
Thank you.
the path that that Indigenous tech or entrepreneurs has gone through? Because, like you said, we both know, and we're entrepreneurs, and we've been fosters of entrepreneurs and what we do for our living. But for people that don't know what tech is like, where did it start? How many people were involved? You said it was very lonely too, and where's it come to today?
So where it's come to today is there is a very bright, up and coming, Indigenous talent pool of technologists that are contributing to technology at so many different levels and uh, in so many different ways and different technologies. And those of us, back in the day, starting out, it was harder to find folks, other peers, but we found each other, and a lot of those connections early in tech and the Indigenous tech and professional space are some of my closest friends to this day. But we have quite a few amazing organizations like the First Nations Technology Council, which really spends a lot of time, creating programs to get Indigenous youth into technology. And there are organizations like the First Nations, sorry, and there are organizations like the Indigenous Tech Circle, which I'm also vice chair of. And we just started that this year. On June 21st, 2024, this year, we launched the Indigenous Tech Circle, where we have, I think, close to 300 members now. So from coast to coast, US and Canada, across Turtle Island. And there are just so many people leading in so many aspects of technology. So the landscape has really changed. And I believe that as Indigenous peoples, we need to invest in technology. I see technology as a path towards economic justice. I want to see our communities, First Nation communities, economic development corporations invest in technology, because I think this is a pathway to just economic resilience. In the same way you see Silicon Valley and you see the boom of all these tech companies and the wealth that is being created. Well, I want that wealth to stay within our communities. I want that to come from our people. There's, in my mind, no reason why the next large, technology unicorn platform, like a Google or an Apple, even like, couldn't come from our people, because our people we've always been technologists and very entrepreneurial, and I think it will happen. And so, a big part of my work through Animikii is, how do we encourage others to choose technology and or entrepreneurship as a career path?
Excellent. The one thing that I absolutely love, and in my journey and our journey, being Indigenous entrepreneurs and then working with so many different entrepreneurs from all over Canada, the similarity, and I always say this when we talk about shows like the Bears Lair, what spearheaded the Bears Lair was because we wanted to hear, for Canada to hear our voice in respect of breaking through the barriers and stereotypes that we have businesses, we have home-based businesses, we have medium-sized businesses, but we also have technology and innovation businesses and food sovereignty. But straight across the board, at your level, at micro and medium levels, I find that the commonality is just giving back and making this world a better place for not just Indigenous people, but people in general, whether it's saving our environment or helping entrepreneurs or data sovereignty or whatever it may be. So it's really amazing that on that technology field that you're saying the same thing, because there's so many different levels. Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week is this week. Well, by the time this airs, it would have been over, but it is this week. And even on the fashion and performance side, giving back to community and really what reconciliation or reconciliation really is. So thank you for that. And not only do you promote your business online as a technology business, as an author, but you go out and you speak to so many different levels. For one, the Collision Conference, which is one of the biggest technology conferences in the world, and you're on panels left, right, and center all over the world. How do you find that your message is being received on not just a national level but an international level, and who is listening?
Yeah. Well, early days, in tech, I would go to all of these mainstream conferences and not see any Indigenous representation on these stages. There were no companies, no Indigenous tech companies featured or this kind of thing. And when I would explain what I was doing as an Indigenous technologist, I mean, just the question, what is Indigenous technology? Like, what do you do? Like, I would almost be kind of brushed aside as like some small niche little technology business that was never going to scale, or I just never felt super valued in those spaces. And like I said, like it was a lonely place to be in the mainstream tech world. And yeah, fast forward to Collision Conference this year. On the main stage, you see so many amazing thought leaders, and through this era of truth and reconciliation, I think has lifted up a lot of voices of survivors as well. But through their calls to action, I think the mainstream business world, including the tech industry, is sort of awakening to another way of doing business potentially. And like you mentioned, giving back, like this is really in our DNA as Indigenous peoples. How do we give back to community? And you're starting to see that shift in technology spaces as well, to the point where, on mainstream tech spaces, they're talking about ethical technologies and responsible AI and, responsible use of data and storytelling, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing a shift in these mainstream spaces of sort of looking towards Indigenous thought leadership. And so, I'm much busier these days as a speaker within mainstream circles because they're reaching out a little bit more so. And but beyond myself, like there's, if you look at the Indigenous Tech Circle, the amazing folks that are participating, contributing there are more voices. Like I am amazed and surprised these days. Like before, I felt like I knew everybody in who was Indigenous in tech, and now I feels like every week there's somebody new and amazing doing some new initiative or that kind of thing. And it's just really, really an exciting time to see that shift over the years.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing to hear. And one question I really have, and this could go on, it's a big question, but do you see entrepreneurship or even just jobs happening on reserve with the extension of fiber, with so many things that we can do online and remotely, so that we're creating more careers, more jobs in remote locations, our communities?
Yeah,
where
the
people don't have to
CRTC.
leave. Sorry, yeah, go ahead. Where people don't have to leave.
Yeah, and then
Exactly.
like $100,000, six-figure jobs, that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So the CRTC mandated quite a few years ago that broadband was a human right in Canada, right? And so, but what is defined as the speed of broadband? It's not as fast as you would expect in, say, urban centers. And guess which communities are being connected last, right? It's always Indigenous folks, right? So there still is that digital divide between folks that are connected and communities that are not connected. And you see those disparities through the COVID pandemic, where even access to healthcare was more challenging. And but then there are tools like Starlink, right, which uses satellites to get people high speed. And I've heard from many community members who are in rural or remote areas that is helping. It's able to connect communities with virtual healthcare, and for entrepreneurs to start businesses and do those kinds of things as well. But from a human rights perspective, where the CRTC is looking like, this is right for everybody. Well, there's still a cost to accessing things like Starlink. There's still ethical considerations. We actually have an article on our site all about Starlink and the sort of pros and cons to something like that. But yeah, things are shifting and changing. But from an impact perspective, impact in people's individual lives and their families and their communities, being able to work where your root system are is so important, where your family connections are, where your territory is. These are all medicines that we can access when we're within our support systems and our support circles. And so, yeah, technology are allowing people to work remote. And a big thing that we advocate for at Animikii is to get into technology career pathways because you can work remote. Salaries are something that you can scale quite nicely, and so, but then there's also opportunities for people to expand and network and see what other people are doing sort of within the broader ecosystem. And so that's why we started the Indigenous Tech Circle is a way to now connect all these Indigenous technologists that are maybe working remote or maybe having challenges, and how can we get some peer mentorship and support and that kind of thing. So it's really, really exciting time there in that way.
And the support of AI now.
Yeah. Yes, that's being Generation X. It's so hard to wrap your head around. I know that you've grown up with technology, but when I'm still a note taker, I am still a write your own letter type person, and I have EAs that can write something for me in 2 minutes on AI. So it's to keep that personal touch to it. Where is the balance for this? So you can use AI for good or use AI for bad, right? And where do you think that the path of AI is going? And it's really interesting because you mentioned that you have a couple books where the AI is being used for cultural information, and maybe you can explain that a little bit. And I know that you said they're ebooks, and just talk about that with our audience.
Yeah, so we have two ebooks under our Data Back series. So the first one, Data Back, we talk about land back. Well, why not data back as well? And data as a resource as well is being extracted from, and we're seeing that with AI as well. AI just needs an inordinate amount of data, and data has been said to data is the new oil kind of thing, right? So it's a resource, and sort of people are coming for our data now too, and we're seeing this with generative AI that just needs so much data. But the two books, the first one focuses on Indigenous data sovereignty, which really, from a sovereignty lens, talks about the importance of Indigenous peoples owning and controlling their own data. And so that's the first book, talks a lot about the importance of that. And then our book that we just launched recently is it's called Data Back Volume 2, Truth Before Indigenous AI. And so we really do a deep dive into how these technologies are used, everything from the amount of data that is needed and or extracted and or stolen that are used to create these large language models. And we further talk about the environmental impact as well, because I think a lot of times people think about AI, it's just this thing in the cloud that the quote cloud, the so-called cloud with our data is just zeros and ones, right? It's like this thing that is doesn't really have any impact on the land. But what we're seeing with AI movement right now, and as I mentioned, I've seen a lot of technologies come and go, but AI is definitely very intriguing, and I think is going to be one of the things that shift the technology space for all of us, and we're all seeing that. But what we're seeing with the uptake of AI, just the amount of data and processing that it needs, all of this data is manifested in the land somewhere. Your zeros and ones sit in some Indigenous territory somewhere, right? The fiber optics that connect this call to from my place to where you are now, those fiber optics are traveling through many Indigenous territories, right? And then when the data is sitting somewhere, it's got to be in a data center or sitting somewhere physically. And so with AI, like some of the groups that we're working with at Animikii, we're sitting with one tribal leader in the United States where something like 70% of all the world's like data center traffic flows through. She says we are literally fighting data centers because of AI. Data centers need to be cooled. They bring cool water in and cool off, the data center, and then put warm water back into the rivers and the lakes and the ecosystem. And Yeah, I kind of been explaining this almost like Sim City. If you played Sim City, where you're building buildings, say along the river, the more data that is needed, more of these data centers are being created, right? And so there's a physical manifestation of all of this these data needs, and it's impacting Indigenous territories and Indigenous peoples, and really undoing the amount of energy needs, really undoing a lot of progress we've made in sort of clean energy and just energy reduction, carbon reduction, all these kinds of things. And we dig into this and a lot more in our ebook. So you're probably hearing a lot of maybe worry or skepticism in my voice when I describe AI. I've seen a lot of technologies come and go, but this one in particular has real impact on Indigenous peoples and our lands. We can get into the generative AI aspects as well. That is, very error prone as well. Like, yeah, you can have it, summarize an email or draft something, but in this current moment, it's very error prone as well. And so, looking at all these things together, we're hesitantly adopting AI and looking into that, but really, like with any technology that we've been building over the 20 years, how do we put an Indigenous lens on these technologies so that we can create no harm or reduce harm as much as possible through technology?
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Yeah, all of that. And I'll definitely read that book. The one thing we know, we have a renewables company. We've been in the energy sector for a long time for clean energy. And it's hard for explain to the public how much energy is actually used and what that means and the impact. So I'm definitely going to jump into that.
And I have a question because I know that our viewers and our listeners aren't necessarily apprised to technology or renewables or what have you. But so when you talk about data, what does that mean with Indigenous communities? Because I know data centers are getting built on Indigenous land, and people, hashtag data back. What does that mean? And I know what it means, but I just want our viewers and your explanation to explain, what does that mean for Indigenous communities, their data?
Mm-hmm. So in our first data back book, we talk a lot about sort of what are data and the different components of that, and what is the Indigenous perspective on data. Like as Indigenous peoples, we've always been tracking and recording and sharing and passing on data, whether that's through orally, through oral histories, or in our regalia, or in our in our art, or in data in the land as well. So when we talk a lot about how is Indigenous data different than maybe just personal data or individual data, it's a collective data. So one example might be if there are certain songs or stories even that are shared within community. Well, some of that data is meant only within certain families, or to only be shared at certain times of the year, or it was with certain families and that kind of thing. And so looking at the collective ownership access of that data, there are some really amazing frameworks out there around data sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
There's the OCAP principles, OCAP, ownership, control, access, and possession. And we talk about that in our book as well. But and that framework was created through the First Nations Information Governance Center out of Ottawa. But there's also the FAIR and the CARE principles, which it's more of a global framework for Indigenous data sovereignty. And so the CARE, C, stands for collective benefit. So how do these data benefit the communities collectively? And so you're seeing a lot of data being this sort of hashtag data back, trying to get data back into communities' ownership, control, access, and possession. And we're doing this with one project out of the Six Nations Survivor Secretariat, where there are data about the Mohawk Institute residential school. It's one of the longest running residential schools in Canada. So there's data in so many disparate systems, like provincial and federal governments, through like Truth and Reconciliation Commission, through RCMP or child welfare organizations, or through the churches. And if you're a community member that's looking for answers about your family, about people in your community that may have gone to this residential school, having all that data into the community that now the community owns. Because if the data is about the people from that community should control that data. So that's what we mean by data back. It's really through that sovereignty lens.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, we work with many nations across the country in strategic planning, and finding access or accessing any of the past information is so difficult. So to have it centralized in one place, I think that really is the future for nations. Excuse me, accessing more capital, doing projects more efficiently, and then moving forward. So really exciting.
Absolutely. And I think the barrier and the gap, and that we found working with a lot of different Indigenous communities all over Canada, is the fact that all of the records from chief of council and applications and reports and what have you are usually housed in archaic files that sit there because they need to be scanned, and then they need to be organized and what have you. And it's just such an arduous job that the nations just continue moving forward from today onwards. And we've had many Indigenous communities that have had all of their files stored in one place, and then it's burnt down.
Yeah.
And then they have no
flood
record. They have no flood, and they have damage, and they have no records. So in respect of just the sovereignty, the data sovereignty, in respect of just your governance, the history, whether it's culture, whether it's your independent family, song, legends, artwork, etc. It's very, very important to do that. And if you are a nation that's listening, or leadership that is listening, what would you say would be the first step in respect of entering this technology of data sovereignty?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've heard so many stories of the filing cabinets in the basement that floods, or the building burns down. All that information is lost, right? So how can we create these systems that can protect and secure that data as well, but also in a way that does that safely, that doesn't open that data up to prying eyes for wherever that data is stored? Because where that data is held, you need to really trust where that is. And if it's in the cloud, or if people are putting that data into now AI systems that are then used to train more AI systems, then you're kind of breaching that data sovereignty piece.
Yeah, we're working with a really cool company called Makwa 7, John Harrison, Indigenous owned, and the work they're doing and what I'm learning each day that we're together is really impressive.
Yeah. So I would reach out to us if you want any data sovereignty information, because I think that's a really important piece for sure. So tell us a little bit about where Animikii is going now. So what do you see for the future of your business? You mentioned that, so originally, was it the business just yourself? I know that you wrote a book with your brother, Scott, who's amazing, and a hypnotist, which is crazy, as a brother. But now you have 30 employees. And what kind of jobs if somebody wants to enter the technology space in respect of working for you, or maybe even starting their own company, what kind of positions would there be?
So in tech, it's really such a wide range. Like we have software developers and interface designers, product developers, these kinds of roles that you might expect in a technology company. But we also have project managers and product managers, and folks that like writers, and people that write technical reports and this kinds of things. So if you're interested to work at a technology company and you're not a coder or a developer, there's so many other things that you can contribute your skill set to. And I think there's just so many opportunities. But so with my company, we're looking to scale and grow further. What's next for us is we have our data platform that's called Niwen, and it's a data tool that you can use to design data sets and manage data governance, and you can even build apps and things on top of that. So we do that for our clients and our partners. we use our data platform to customize and build things on top of. Next year, 2025, we're launching our software as a service version of that platform so that folks like yourself can sign up and start managing your data and governance on your own. But then also you can host and put that anywhere. So from a data sovereignty perspective, where that data, the possession of that data, that really matters. And so it's the first data platform that we know of that is being built with data sovereignty from the ground up. And that's something that will benefit Indigenous peoples, but also those kinds of practices, especially in this era of AI, will benefit other marginalized communities where data is, sought after, but something, building in Indigenous values into technology is something that we believe everybody will benefit from. So for us, it's about bringing Indigenous technology to the world, and in the way that our technologies and philosophies have been brought to the world before, that the world benefits from to this day. So that's what's next for us, and we're looking to scale and grow. And we're always looking for values aligned individuals to work with us. So we are currently hiring for developers, and if folks are interested to join in an Indigenous technology company like ours, I'd say follow along on LinkedIn and on our site, so that if people are interested to enter the technology space, and maybe Animikii is the place for you.
And a little bit about the Innovation Technology Circle as well. If our listeners or viewers want to know more about the Indigenous Technology Circle, do you all meet on a regular basis? What is the achievement goal of this circle?
Yeah, there are regular meetups every month, but and there's starting to be some regional ones as well. But yeah, you can learn more at jointechcircle.com. And if you're an Indigenous person in tech, you can join. You can see all the other events that are happening. But yeah, the idea is to be a bit of a convener as well of Indigenous technologists, and yeah, it's just growing. We're over 300 members now.
Oh, wow. Great. Well, we know you're busy because, we've seen your profile and see you around speaking everywhere. But you said before that creativity is a really important part to what you do as an outlet and outside of the tech space. So what do you do in your spare time?
What do you do to balance you?
Yeah, I feel that, creativity, I think every entrepreneur needs to have a creative outlet. I guess what I'll say is I find business and entrepreneurship to be a creative outlet in its own right. I see a lot of creativity and just the problem solving. But that being said, I think there needs to be something outside of entrepreneurs so they can kind of fill their cup as well. And for me, it's been making music. I've been a musician for many years. But yeah, that's kind of one thing that I like to do. But also, yeah, just spending time with my family and making sure that I have a good work-life balance and work-life integration. And that's what entrepreneurship has done for me. It's allowed me to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my kids up until, they were of school age. And I would do school drop-offs, kid pickups, all that kind of stuff. Now my kids are much older; they're teenagers, but we're still able to make time as a family. So that's what entrepreneurship has done for me, is created that flexibility, and we extend that flexibility to our team as well. We have one of the most flexible work-life balance sort of corporate cultures, where it's not uncommon for us to see, in our Slack channel, people like, oh, got to do kid pickup, or, I'm off a field trip with my kids' field trip this day, or, got to take my dog to the vet. Like, there's so much flexibility and a lot of give and take. And so we've built that into our HR practices as well, where a lot of mainstream tech companies are going the opposite way. Everybody in the office 9 to 5. We're going the other way, which is full flexibility. Because I feel if I've benefited as an entrepreneur from working at Animikii and having that flexibility, why wouldn't I give that to my staff as well? So we have a very entrepreneurial mindset, and I have to model that as well. I can't just put a policy for my team and say, oh, we value work-life balance, but then I'm working 80-hour weeks. I also, as a leader, try to model that balance as well. And so I do make a point of, making sure that I share with the team how I am filling up my cup. And when I release a new song, something like that, or I have a creative outlet, I share that with our team as well.
Oh God, great advice.
It is great advice. And I think that's a really very smart entrepreneurial way of making that core corporate space where your team members don't feel like they have to go off and start their own company to have that flexibility. As you know, being an entrepreneur and entrepreneurs that listen, and ourselves as well, cash flow and busier means you're more successful, and nobody else cares about your company as much as you do. And it can be so tiring to keep up with that momentum. And I think a lot of people think that entrepreneurism might be easier than having a job and getting a steady paycheck because you have that flexibility, and it is not. You're married to a full-time job, but to have the flexibility of giving your corporate culture that flexibility of being an entrepreneur, but also having that security as well, is incredibly smart corporate culture for anybody that's listening. That would be really great. I found it interesting that you're talking. So you are a musician. You had a boy band back in the 90s. All these everyone that's listening, he had a boy back in the 90s called World Citizen, and you can still see some of that music. Can you not? You can still hear some of that music.
Yeah, it's on Spotify under World Citizen.
YouTube,
if you want to hear. I think my brother, and it was with my brother Scott as well. So we've been finding ways to collaborate for years. I think he's put a couple things on YouTube, but on any platform, it's there. If you're interested to hear me as a 17-year-old rapper,
Yes.
singer, dance musician from the 90s, well, thanks, Gina. You just told everybody.
No problem. Now you got your secret, but that also leads up to my next, right? Is it Bonesi or Bonesi?
Yep. Benesi, Binesi. So I've released 2 songs this year under Benesi, and this again is my creative outlet that I can put my music out through, and I'm working on a EP currently.
Great. And what kind of music is it?
It's kind of pop, R&B, a little bit of rap kind of thing as well. So it's, if you were to take World Citizen, Jeff from 17-year-old from like the late 90s, and then into 2024, it's whatever evolution that is. And in a way, 90s music is coming back. So
that's awesome. It really is.
What it is.
Deadpool too. They brought it all back.
Oh,
yeah. Exactly.
I do love to hear that creative outlet. And I think for closing, because you're an entrepreneur, we're entrepreneurs. A lot of our audience and viewership are entrepreneurs. What are the technologies that an entrepreneur has to have? And I do know this personally, that 2 years ago when we started the Bears Lair, my good friend and Kristen Kozebek put a QR code on something. And I'm like, do you really think that we need this? Do you really think that we need this? I mean, they can just go to the website, they can just go to what have you, and it's pretty easy to develop something like that. But now when we teach kids, we talk about that it's really important for QR codes, and it's really important we teach kids how to give out business cards, and now they're like, why would we do that when we can just tap phones? So
Right.
Just trying to instill the skills that we learned, because we're still going to conferences and what have you. But what is the minimum that you think entrepreneurs should have in this day and age to be successful and respect for people to find us?
Yeah, I think what skills that entrepreneurs need is really just the ability to teach yourself new things. Like I feel like I have a new job every year, and so especially now with AI and all the tools that are coming out, it actually hasn't changed with AI. Just the last 20 years through my business, you always have to learn to try things out and adopt the new and the latest thing. And I think probably MySpace was out when I started my company, and then those things evolved to many other different social networks, and some have come and gone. But now things like LinkedIn. I've given up business cards. I don't do business cards anymore. I open my LinkedIn QR code, and if people want to connect, I show my phone, and we connect instantly on
Yeah.
the spot right there. And if I get a stack of business cards, I typically throw them out, or I never look at them again, kind of thing. Because participating in social networks like LinkedIn, I think is like the go-to network for businesses, and somehow they've found a way to stay relevant through a lot of different social media ups and downs, kind of thing. So yeah, but the main thing is just teaching yourself how to learn the latest and greatest thing. And that's always going to change. And is it exhausting? Yes, it is. All these things that we have to learn, but things we have to do as entrepreneurs.
It is. And we always tell when we teach kids, because we teach kids all over Canada with our Bearsler camps, is an e-commerce website, a transactional website, some business cards, billboard. Are you giving out samples? I mean, there's a lot of marketing that still goes conventional, guerrilla type marketing that would be. But I think LinkedIn, I just learned this, and I show people that are adults all the time that when you go to your LinkedIn profile and you go up where it has your little picture on the left and you press search, and then you'll have that tiny little square on the right-hand side.
Yep.
Touch that square and your LinkedIn QR code profile will come up. I can't even tell you how many people, maybe you can show Jeff, yeah. I can't even tell you how many people that I've showed this to and they're like, what is this? and it's really interesting.
If I do have a business card, so yes, I said the LinkedIn hack, the QR code. I also on my lock screen created a QR code where somebody, if they don't have LinkedIn for whatever reason, I can just sort of show that at a conference. And there's all these like QR code makers online, so instantly my contact goes directly into your phone. And there's Apple now has a direct thing if two people have iPhones, all these tools. But yeah, I think business cards are out, and these digital platforms are in.
Don't tell my kids that we teach. Don't tell the kids that we're teaching that the business cards are out. LinkedIn is yes, the best QR code for your business. Our niece, who is 19 years old, was looking, and we had zero Instagram. We didn't have Instagram a couple of years ago, and she's like, it doesn't even seem like you exist. And I said, I know, I guess I don't exist if I don't have that. So I guess depending on your own company, but thank you so much. Yeah. And again, how do our listeners contact you for any kind of technology support or any kind of the services that you provide, and get some information about also the books that you have to teach us?
Yeah, it's our site, animikii.com, or find me on LinkedIn. Just search up Jeff Ward, and I am Jeff I.O. on all social media platforms.
Okay. Well, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. We could talk for hours about technology because I always learn something every moment that I meet you. So it has been such a pleasure, and thank you for spending the day with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Blair. Please follow us, download this episode, and follow us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok.